Welcome back to Community Practice on Autism Spectrum Disorder and Other Developmental Disabilities. We just heard a fantastic presentation by Mike Hipple from the Wisconsin AAC Network. And now we'd like to move on and introduce James Williams. I have known James for years now. He has been part of the community practice for many years, has been part of the Autism Society's gatherings and others for many years. I know him as a speaker, also have read his books as an author, and have also been very fortunate to hear his musical talents as well. So I'm really interested in what James has to share with us today about exploring cognitive and socially nonverbal and verbal communication barriers for individuals with autism spectrum disorder. James, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much, Tim. And actually, although I said I wasn't going to utilize this feature, I actually do have a PowerPoint that I planned for this presentation. I'm going to
Awesome.
get this set up here.
Very good.
And one of the key things I want people to understand here is the importance of the fact that and this is the title why my presentation has this title is that a lot of us when we think of communication issues, we think of them as just being with those who are nonverbal or those we consider semi-nonverbal. And what I want to show today is a communication issues occur among all parts of the communication autism spectrum, not just those who are nonverbal. And so the title of my presentation today is Exploring Cognitive and Socially Nonverbal and Verbal Communication Barriers for Individuals with ASD. And and the reason why and because some people might be thinking, okay, I'm completely articulate, I'm fully verbal. What knowledge do I have with communication issues? And the answer is A, I was not this way my entire life. I actually had verbal challenges growing up. But B, just because I'm fully articulate and verbal does not mean I have not had issues with communication. They're just different. And so today I'm going to explore an overview based on my personal experiences, Sirius and others, about the spectrum of communication issues that apply not just to those with who do need AAC to communicate, but those like myself who don't need AAC but still struggle with communication. I also think about the fact that one experience that was very eye-opening for me was that when I was in high school, I was part of my high school's peer mentor program. And this was a program where kids were assigned to work with kids with disabilities in various special ed classroom settings. And being someone considered a higher functioning person in the autism spectrum, I know there's some people who don't like that term, but technically in special ed, that's what I was called. And I'm not trying to offend anyone by using that term. That's just the nomenclature that we have to live with in special ed. I was often assigned to those who were nonverbal and sometimes autistic. And the reason why they assigned me that was they knew I had autism myself, and they knew that an autistic person might have a better ability to understand another autistic person, even if they couldn't communicate. And they were actually right. And there were a lot of things that I saw that the teachers were doing that I didn't think were right. And I actually was sometimes exposing some things the teachers weren't doing right when I was working with those kids, sometimes to great fanfare. And in the end, I actually was considered in my graduating class to be one of their top peer mentors as a result. In fact, I periodically visit that classroom that I worked in many years ago to talk on a regular basis to the next generation of peer mentors about my experiences. But that's another story. So basically, I one of the takeaways I want everyone to understand here is a just because a person is fully articulate doesn't mean they don't struggle with communication. So, like Tim said, I'm a speaker, author, and musician, and I've experienced many communication abilities throughout my life. I've actually lived a lot of the entire gamut. So, I was born I said a few words, and then around a year and a half, my language actually digressed. And then I became nonverbal for a while. And then I progressed from being nonverbal. Then I learned how to read before I was fully articulate in language. So I start with a few words, then I digress. Then I'm nonverbal for a while. Then I start to read, but I still can carry on a conversation. So I can read things. I don't understand what I'm reading, but I can read things from books, and I can read, ingredients off food labels. But if you were to say, "Hi, how are you?" I'd be completely silent. And then I had limited language. I was having echolalia, but I still wasn't having issues. I still was having issues with communication. And then finally, I became fully verbal after going through those different stages of communication abilities. And I have memories from all those different stages of my life. And I'm going to share some of those memories. So memories. And that's the basis of this presentation. The fact that I remember what it was like to be nonverbal and what it was like to be able to read and then not have communication. And then what it was like to echo everyone. And then after the echoing, still having language, but struggling with grammar and struggling with pronouns. And I think of the fact that because it took me so long to be able to communicate, there is one scar that I have to live the rest of my life in, and that is I have never been able to learn any language other than English. I have tried so hard to learn other foreign languages, whether in school or other places. I've just never been able to. The closest I've ever gotten to being able to understand a foreign language is the ability to sometimes sight read a foreign language, particularly Spanish, but I've never been able to fully speak a foreign language. And it's not because of racism, not because of being intolerant of other languages. It's just due to that scar of those communication issues I had growing up. And I remember having to get waived from foreign language requirements when I was in high school because of that bona fide deficit. But one way I've accommodated is whenever I'm at conferences where most people don't speak English, I often, instead of doing simultaneous interpretation, I prefer to do sentence by sentence, because that way it gives those people a better opportunity to understand what I'm saying more often than the simultaneous method that is often preferred in conferences where people speak multiple languages.
James, can I just interrupt quickly for
Yeah.
a moment? I wasn't sure. We're still seeing just the general outline view of your PowerPoint, and I didn't know if the PowerPoint was supposed to be progressing or in a presenter view, or where we were at with the PowerPoint.
Does
Just
it
wanted
say
to
an
check in.
overview of my experiences?
Nope, we are still on page 1, exploring cognitive and socially nonverbal and verbal
Then I do
communication
not know
barriers.
what's going on, because that's not what I'm seeing.
Oh dear. Um, okay, yep, we are stuck on the first slide.
In that case, I'm just going to give the presentation. There's not enough time to troubleshoot this,
Okay, sounds good.
because I'm also going to share some YouTube videos too.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. So basically, I'm just going to give a quick overview here. So one thing, of course, a lot of other people say this. So when I was nonverbal, I knew other people were talking, and I often wanted to talk, but was unable to. And I did whatever I could in order to respond. And then I remember starting to develop language, but not being able to be fully fluent. And oftentimes for me too, reading was my way of trying to communicate to others. Sometimes when I saw something in a book, so when I wasn't talking, I would do whatever I could to talk to people, but I remembered other people were talking and I couldn't talk back. And then when I started to read, sometimes I would try to read things that reflected my thoughts and feelings. And then when I learned how to write and type, I would write and type things that were my ability as much as I possibly could in order to communicate. And then when I started developing some basic communication skills, I would often echo things, but sometimes I remember trying to selectively echo based on what I was feeling. And then there came a time when I would watch things in movies, and there was something I saw in a movie that reflected who I was, and I would often quote the movie, and they thought I was just memorizing things verbatim, but I was actually communicating what I was feeling with those quotes. And then and then I went through a phase of confusing pronouns where people couldn't understand that I was confusing you with I. And sometimes I would often say, James this and James that, because I just couldn't understand other pronouns. And sometimes, referring to yourself in the third person, that's just a adaptation to pronoun confusion. I just want to give a caveat, though, although obviously I didn't know this as a kid. In today's world where we're trying to accommodate those who are LGBT, pronouns are a big thing in that community. Sometimes autistic people have been shamed and shunned in that community for confusing people's pronouns. We need to help the LGBT community understand that pronoun confusion is a genuine part of an autistic disability. It has nothing to do with homophobia, transphobia, or anything that so many non-disabled people do in order to put that community down. But there's been a lot of misunderstandings between the autism and LGBT community because of that pronoun confusion. I just want to give that word of caution. We need to be teaching that community that pronoun confusion is a bona fide disability. It's not phobia or intolerance.
Hmm.
But to get back to that story, so pronoun confusion, in fact, was the last thing I had before I became fully verbal. And then finally, though, when I'm fully verbal, that never ended my communication issues. In fact, I've had communication issues the rest of my life. I'm going to have communication issues till the day I die. And one of the reasons why that is A, when we think of communication issues, we think that it's the domain of people with language challenges, but we also think that these challenges are cognitive solely. And yes, many language issues are cognitive, but we also have to remember there are just as many communication issues that are social, that are not cognitive. You can be cognitively nonverbal, you can cognitively struggle with pronouns, but you can be socially nonverbal as well. And socially nonverbal means that also kind of known as some people refer to as, mutism, selective mutism. But the truth is, you can appear to be nonverbal when you can speak, but you are so scared of talking because you have been burned so many times growing up. You've been burned so much that that been burned so much that you just don't want to talk because you're so terrified of being judged. And sometimes people can be nonverbal because they're socially nonverbal. And there are just as many social types of verbal issues as there are communication issues. And one of the things that I tell people is, yeah, you can have nonverbal issues due to cognitive deficits, but you can also be nonverbal for social impairments. And one example that I try to give, when I remind people, communication issues occur among most people with autism, no matter where they fall on the autism spectrum. Communication issues don't die when you become verbal, and unique issues emerge for both groups of people. For example, I'm going to talk as an example. We know about the fact that many people who are nonverbal, they often can't talk much at all about their feelings in conversations. But on the other end of the spectrum, those with autism who are fully verbal often tend to talk too much and dominate conversations about their feelings. So we have to remember there are two ends of the communication spectrum here. You got those who are talking too little and those who are talking too much, and are just as much struggling with communicating their feelings without talking too much. And I think about how there's a really amazing autistic self-advocate in Wisconsin named Ashley Matthey, who calls herself being a bubbly autistic. And oftentimes she refers to that term because she's often getting in trouble for talking too much. And Ashley and I actually bonded at an autism conference, and we talked about our shared experience of the fact that we're both struggling with that talking too much that other people have imposed on us. So I'm now going to give a few descriptions of those different issues. And I mentioned earlier, I was a peer mentor working with people on different disabilities with communication issues. And what I saw how AAC was really helping people, but I also saw how AAC was being misused. And one of the ways of that misuse is that there's one thing that people who can communicate are also trying to navigate here, and that is that we're living in a world where it's not just about the communication. There are very strict unspoken rules about what you can and can't communicate to people. And sometimes it's precisely those strict rules that often harm autistic people because sometimes, and I'm going to use the word X here because I'm referring to many different things, and there are examples I like to use in particular, but I don't want the example to distract me with the main point of communication in this case. So I'm going to say X. So there are many things that autistic people have an absolute need to communicate. But oftentimes, those things, X, refers to things that society says you are not allowed to communicate with certain people, or you're not allowed to communicate at all. It is inherently inappropriate to say X to certain people. The problem, though, is that sometimes when you are struggling with X, or X is a big part of your life, X is impacting you very much, you have to talk about X, and you therefore have to defy social norms just to openly talk about X. And one of the problems with those, and I remember when many of my friends were verbal, we had the ability to rebel against those rules. We would find secret locations and places to talk about X freely, even though society was telling us we couldn't. Whereas those who relied on AAC and other people to help them, those people would inadvertently not allow them to talk about those things that were necessities for them. And sometimes would even say things that were not even appropriate or even upset the people that they were using the AAC with. Like, I'll never forget this blatant misuse of AAC that occurred when I was a student peer buddy. And what was happening was I was in a classroom with a lot of people who were nonverbal. And one of the things the teacher instructed the peer buddies to do was when it was time for the kids who could not communicate to talk to their classroom, and in the morning they would say, okay, what did you do yesterday? Well, what happened was the teacher would tell the peer buddies to take the AAC devices and just make something up and have the kids hit the AAC button and then praise them for participation. Now, I was disgusted by this practice, and I decided that I was going to change a few things. So the first time I was told, oh, just make something up and have the nonverbal kid you're working participate. And this was not someone with autism. This was a person with very severe cerebral palsy. The first thing I did was I decided to put on a fake Scottish accent to make it look like I was not the person talking, but the other person was talking too. So that was my first strategy to subvert this practice that disgusted me. And then I realized, okay, you know what? I'm actually going to get the contact information of this kid and actually find out what the person really did outside of school. And then, but then what happened? And so the first thing that really upset was, okay, they're just, there was this show they were putting on. But then I'll never forget that something that they also did, which ironically, the great researcher Dr. Brenda Miles says you should never do in self-contained classrooms with communication issues. Everyone had to compliment another classmate on something. I like this, I like that. It could be a piece of clothing, it could be that. They would require every kid to say, I like your this, I like your that. I like your that. And I'll never forget when there was this one girl who was nonverbal, and her aide, I'm going to call her Miss A, was looking at Miss B, another aide, and she put in the talker of Miss A. She put in the talker of this nonverbal. I like the undershirt under your blouse, Miss B. And I'm looking at this and I'm really disgusted. A, you're just saying something to another teacher. That's you talking. And you're also modeling something that if a lot of the male students said that, they could get in big trouble. And keep in mind that, like many classrooms, there was a male majority in this self contained classroom. So I immediately raised my hand and said to the teacher, hey, can I speak, please? And I said, look, what you heard here was probably okay for this nonverbal girl to say if she was with her close friend. And the truth is, Miss A and Miss B were very openly very close friends and were openly flaunting that friendship when they really shouldn't, in my opinion. But I didn't have the power to say anything. And I said, okay, what you said might have been okay for her to say, but you guys in the classroom, please don't say this to somebody. And interestingly enough, because of the intricate rules of compliments, as the researcher Dr. Brenda Miles has even said to teachers, never have compliment hour in your classroom for that very reason. And but see, these were the examples of misuse of AAC that I was seeing too. And what also I saw too was there was no effort to acknowledge the fact that sometimes you have to break social and communication rules in order to get what you need. And the problem is that we don't adequately teach. We're not willing to, because we have to break our own comfort level sometimes when we're helping people with communication issues with that. Now, I'm now going to continue by showing you guys a clip actually from a phase in my life when I wasn't fully verbal, but I wasn't fully nonverbal. And this was a meltdown clip I had when I was doing an activity with my mom. It was spelling the word Oldsmobile. This was during the time when I was able to read and write better than I could talk. So I'm going to show this clip to you guys. And I was just three,
James,
just about to turn four.
just remember, James, as you share the clip, that with Zoom, there's a optimize for video button that a lot of people forget to press. That's going to make us be able to hear the audio of it. So hopefully that will not happen. Hopefully it'll work.
All right. All right, let me get this here. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
All right, here we go.
You do not have any sound.
All right, let me see how we can. Okay, no sound. How do we solve that?
I would say stop
All
the
right.
clip now. Go back when you share your screen. Look
Yeah.
in the lower left corner.
Yep.
Is there an
There we go.
optimize for video?
All right.
Optimize audio? Let's try that.
Let's try this now.
Yes.
Put it in. Let's focus it. Mama will do the M. There. Okay. Mama will do the M. Boone will do the O. Osmo. Okay. Boone will do the line. Boone will do the line.
So this
Yay.
is the
Now
time when
Mama
I'm
will
struggling
do.
with pronouns. So I would refer to myself in the third person. My mom would sometimes do that
There.
to
Now
accommodate
Boone
my
will
need.
do the I. L. Yay. Now do the L. Here, wait. We're going to end it. Oh, come on, sweetheart. Wait, we're going to finish it. No. Stop. Stop it right now. Stop it right now. Stop it right now, sweetheart. Stop it. We're going to pause from here. We're. What do you want to do, sweetheart? What do you want, sweetheart? And now people wonder why they want. Okay, we're going to pick up little Boone.
That's my sister. She was a baby then.
We finished it, sweetheart. It looks very beautiful. Okay, now we'll do it again. What out, sweetheart? Okay, turn the page then.
All right, so basically, what you saw here was a meltdown I had because I really could not communicate what was going on. The fact that I was upset about the misspelling of the word here, and it was hard for my mom to understand why that was upsetting. And one of the things that I'm trying to remind people here is I wasn't fully nonverbal, but I wasn't fully verbal either, and that communication issues occur among the entire spectrum. Now, one of the things that I also want to point out to people is that first, I'm just going to give a disclaimer. I do not blame my mom for her failure to understand the situation. Everybody learns, everybody grows. She's grown, she's learned from that mistake. And I think we all have to remember that we really have to stop blaming people for the genuine mistakes of their past. And we just stop judging people based on things they did many years ago. And instead of haunting them later, and look at how much the person has done to change and improve. Because the truth is, truly bad parents, truly bad caregivers do nothing to improve. Good people make mistakes and work hard to load for them. It's only the bad it's the way to determine if you have a bad person working with an autistic person or not is A, are they learning from them? I don't judge those teachers in that classroom just solely for what they did, but because they actively didn't try to change based on my observations working with them as a student. That's what I tell people. Don't blame people for people's initial actions. See how they react to them, see what they're doing to learn from them. Now, I'm going to close now because I know I have a few time limits. I'm going to close now with another routine. Now, Tim introduced me as a musical artist, so I do have to close with some music. And one thing I'm just going to say right now is one example of that communication I had was when I was at an autism conference. I'm not going to say what that conference is, though some of you know this story who've heard me say it, know more of the details here. And this is a conference where I met a person who didn't just have autism, but other medical comorbidities. And one of the main symptoms of her comorbidity was a symptom that reflected something that society says you can't communicate with most people. Yet that was one of the core symptoms of her condition. And I'm going to call it X. And so X, and so X now is something that she's not allowed to talk about. The problem though is that because it's such a major medical thing, she has to talk about it when she's with people because it could cause a problem and then that could embarrass her. And I remember when she told me when we met each other about X, and her support people lashed at her. You don't bring up X in front of people you don't know. And I spent the rest of that conference defending her right to talk about X. And then she was on panels and she said, you can't talk about X in this panel. Well, finally, she won the battle when years later at that conference, someone asked a question that ironically made where the appropriate answer was to bring up X. And she brought it X to an audience fanfare. And it was a victory. And so many of the autistic people in the audience who had known who she'd revealed what X was all applauded that she finally was free to talk about X. I will not say what X is out of respect for this conference, but I'm now going to close now with another example of communication, which also shows the fact that sometimes we can't communicate with each other because of some of our preconceived ideas about who we are. And sometimes when people don't see that, they communicate better. And I'm going to give a segment. Who here knows the classic holiday movie, The Polar Express? All right, so in The Polar Express, there's the signature song is When Christmas Comes to Town. And what I love about that scene is here you have three children whom society would place in a very unique hierarchical position, but the children aren't seeing each other that way. The children are seeing each other as fully equal and are looking at each other as face value, even though society would assume different things about these children. So I'm going to close my presentation. I mean, Aaron, I want to thank you for giving this idea of showing that book, but unfortunately, I didn't want to risk technical glitches. So I'm going to show a similar idea that incorporates my music and my message, similar to the message you wanted to share, which is this segment from the Polar Express, the signature song, When Christmas Comes to Town. I'm going to get this ready for everyone, and that will close the presentation. And then what I'm going to do is, for those who have questions, because I'm going to be filling in a segment in the panel, I will answer your questions during the panel. And I'm going to play along with part of the song, but only part of it.
I'm wishing on a star and trying to believe that even though it's far, you'll find me Christmas Eve. I guess that Santa's busy, 'cause he's never come around. I think of him when Christmas comes to town. The best time of the year, when everyone comes home with all this Christmas cheer, it's hard to be alone. Putting up the Christmas tree with friends who come around. It's so much fun when Christmas comes to town. Presents for the children, wrapped in red and green. All the things I've heard about, but never really seen. No one will be sleeping on the night of Christmas Eve, hoping Santa's on his way. When Santa's sleigh bells ring, I listen all around. The herald angels sing, I never hear a sound. And all the dreams of children once lost will all be found. That's all I want when Christmas comes to town. That's all I want when Christmas comes to town.
All right, thank you all for listening.
Thank you, James. We look forward to you coming back for the panel along with a few other experts with you. We are going to take approximately a 10-minute break here, and then we'll come back just before the top of the hour and go on into our panel. Hopefully you can all stick around. Feel free. I'm not going to close the room or anything, so you can feel free to continue the discussions in the chat. There's a really good discussion going on. So I'm very grateful to you, James, for sharing what you shared, and I appreciate it as well. So thank you. We'll be back in about 10 minutes, but again, the chat will stay open. I'm just going to stop the recording.